Welcome to our program, Electric Vehicles, the Key to the Future. This program will explore the technologies, business, and environmental issues raised by electric vehicles, or EVs. We'll also address some of the IP issues implicated by EVs. We'll start off with a brief overview of EVs and a discussion of a recent case that impacted the EV field. We then will spend the bulk of our time discussing the current state of EVs, EV technology and development, IP considerations, and the impact of EVs on the environment and the economy. Our speakers today are, first of all, me. I'm Josh Hartman. I'm a partner at Merchant & Gould, and I lead the firm's ITC Section 337 practice group. I have experience representing clients in the automotive and EV space, including the case that we'll be discussing. We're very fortunate to also have on our program Linda Zhang and Monty. Linda is a 25-year veteran of Ford Motor Company and is the chief nameplate engineer of Ford's F-150 Lightning electric truck. Linda's experience also includes Ford vehicle programs such as the Explorer, Escape, and F-150. Monty is the Group Vice President for Advanced Mobility Research and Development with Toyota Motor North America. He's responsible for technical strategy and planning of advanced mobility solutions. And Monty previously served as the Chief Engineer for the Toyota Sienna and the Chief Engineer for the North American region for the Toyota Camry. Standard disclaimer, any opinions that Linda, Monty, and I express today are our own, may not represent the views of Ford, Toyota, Merchant & Gould, or the IPO Education Foundation. So a brief overview of electric vehicles. What do we mean when we talk about electric vehicles? So first of all, there are generally three types of electric vehicles. Hybrid electric vehicles, which are vehicles that rely primarily on an internal combustion engine and also include an electric motor with a small battery for energy storage. Next are plug-in hybrid vehicles, or PHEVs. These combine an internal combustion engine and an electric motor, but compared to hybrid electric vehicles, they have a much larger battery pack and can operate in an all-electric mode. Finally, we have battery electric vehicles, or BEVs. These are powered only by a battery and an electric motor, and do not have an internal combustion engine, and of course do not use gasoline. I want to highlight a few key technical considerations. First is power, which relates to the maximum output of an EV's motor. Range, which relates to the distance that EVs can travel between charges. And finally, charging, which relates to the time it takes for an EV battery to recharge. My point of departure for the EV space was a recent lawsuit before the U.S. International Trade Commission between two EV battery manufacturers, LG Chem, who was the complainant, and SK Innovation, the respondent. LG Chem was and is a leading producer of lithium-ion batteries for EV applications, and its customers have included numerous automotive companies such as VW, Ford, and GM. At the time of the lawsuit, SK was more of an upstart producer in the EV space. Before the lawsuit, it had secured supply agreements with Ford for the F-150 Lightning program and with VW for its MEB EV platform. Just before the lawsuit, SK announced that it had planned to construct a battery manufacturing plant in Georgia. And what led to the lawsuit was SK's recruitment of numerous LG Chem employees who had worked on EV battery technologies and applications. LG asserted a large number of trade secrets in the lawsuit that really cut across the manufacturing process for EV batteries. The asserted trade secrets included information related to the sourcing and specifications for key components, such as electrode slurries, specific processes and equipment settings at each stage of the manufacturing line for electrodes for battery cells, processes for the assembly of cells into modules and packs, and then quality assurance and control processes, as well as business information such as customer requirements and cost-saving measures. How did the lawsuit end up? Well, significantly, the case was not decided on the merits. Instead, the ITC found SK in default based on its destruction of evidence and misconduct related to forensic investigation of that destruction. Upon the finding of default, the ITC entered exclusion and cease and desist orders against SK that would have impacted its ability to import key components into the US for use in its Georgia plant for manufacturing battery cells. And that in turn would have impacted its ability to supply its customers, Ford and VW most prominently. As happens with ITC investigations, after the ITC entered remedial orders against SK, the US Trade Representative reviewed the orders for a possible presidential veto. The orders implicated a number of considerations, including, of course, the protection of intellectual property rights, counterbalanced with the impact on manufacturing jobs in the US if SK was unable to source components for its Georgia plant, and then the ability of Ford and VW to source batteries for their prominent EV programs. In the end, prior to the USTR reaching a decision, the parties settled. LG received a $1.8 billion payment as part of the settlement, and SK was free to supply Ford and VW from its Georgia factory. Now I'd like to welcome Linda Zhang and Monty Kerr to the program. Linda and Monty will talk in a bit more depth about EV development, technologies, and business and environmental considerations. Linda and Monty, welcome. Let's begin by having both of you talk a bit about your roles, your backgrounds, and how you became involved in the EV field. And let's go ahead and start with Linda.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. Hi, Josh. Hi, Monty. So I'm an engineering by trade. I went to University of Michigan and got my electrical engineering degree, and then followed up that with 2 master's programs from U of M as well, computer engineering and an MBA. And I've been with Ford for about 25 years now, starting out in manufacturing and then business development, finance, and strategy, as well as engineering. So my latest role right now is the chief engineer for the F-150 Lightning. And I'm really excited about this one because it's our first all-electric truck, and it's going to be great.
And Monty, would you please tell us a bit about your background and experience at Toyota?
Thank you, Josh. It's a pleasure to be here today and share some of what Toyota is doing in electrification. I'm Monty Kerr. At Toyota, I'm the Group Vice President of Advanced Mobility Research and Development out of our North American R&D headquarters in Ann Arbor, Michigan. My journey with Toyota started in 1992 as a design engineer. And by the way, it was that time in design engineering where I really began to appreciate intellectual property and patents. And we began to view challenging problems as patent opportunities. After about 15 years in various design and engineering management roles, I moved to product planning and I entered the world of battery electric vehicles. I worked on Toyota's 2nd generation RAV4 battery EV, which launched in 2012. And by the way, our first RAV4 EV launched in 1997. And more recently, I was chief engineer of our all hybrid electric Toyota Sienna, which just launched a year ago. And when we announced that we were going to go all hybrid with the Sienna, we surprised a lot of people. It was seen as a risky move, but I have to tell you that with it getting over 36 miles per gallon in a minivan, it's been a huge attraction for our customers, and it's allowed the Sienna to become the #1 selling minivan in the segment. So as long as we can keep up with enough chips to keep it moving. But in my current function in advanced mobility R&D, I'm really excited about some of the work we're doing. For example, we're developing a hydrogen fuel cell electric module that can be a drop-in replacement for diesel engines in heavy-duty trucks. And this year, we just put 10 of those into production on the roads. And my function also is looking a little farther into the future, where we're researching battery electrics, hybrid electrics, and fuel cells, including materials and components. And I can say that there are some really promising technologies coming that could be disruptive and exciting for the industry. So I think we have a lot of risks and a lot of opportunities. It's a really exciting time to be in the auto industry.
Okay, well, thank you so much, both of you, for those answers. Let's talk a little bit more about Ford's and Toyota's approaches to the EV market. And again, let's start with Linda. Linda, Ford has a long history actually with electric vehicles up through its the F-150 Lightning, as you were discussing. Can you speak a bit about Ford's work with electric vehicles?
Yeah, definitely. Ford definitely does have a very long history with electric. Even back in 1914, Henry Ford wanted to provide a battery electric version of the Model T. So, very far reaching back. And hybrids is another area where we've done a lot of work over the years. But if we focus on full battery electric, I think even in 2011, we started electrifying Rangers and Focuses. And most recently, we have started electrifying our most iconic vehicles, starting with the Mustang Mach-E, a performance vehicle, really leveraging that power and performance and that near instant torque from the motor. The E-Transit for our commercial customers, really trying to leverage the total cost of ownership being lower for the fully electric vehicle. And now the F-150 Lightning, America's best-selling vehicle for over 44 years. And I think, with that, we're very well positioned from a leadership perspective in the EV space. And we plan on having fully electric vehicles account for 40 to 50% of our US sales by 2020. And Ford has been committed to being fully carbon neutral worldwide by 2050. So we're driving a lot of that through the iconic vehicles that we talked about. But with that, and that's just a piece of it, we're investing over $30 billion in electrification. So I think that really will help us become, the leader in the EV space for the market.
Thanks, Linda. Monty, you talked a little bit about Toyota's history in the EV space, and especially your work with some of the hybrid electric vehicles that Toyota's brought to market. Can you talk a bit more about Toyota's role in this space, which I think it's interesting. It's Toyota's taken a bit of a different path historically than Ford has, for example.
Yeah, thank you for that. From an electrification standpoint, Toyota is all in. We just had a press event this past week showing our new BZ4X, which is our newest battery electric coming this next spring. And in fact, Toyota has been developing batteries and EV technology really since our first Prius and the RAV4 EV that I mentioned in the 1990s. And we've been developing our own batteries for a long time. We have a large number of patents in batteries, and we recently announced that we will be building a Toyota battery plant here in the US, which will be our 16th manufacturing plant in the US. However, like Ford, our goal is not electrification. Our goal is to reduce carbon emissions. And we also have that goal of zero carbon by 2050. And we think we need to do this reduction of carbon emissions as much as possible, as quickly as possible. So Toyota's approach is to provide a portfolio of options to meet our customers' needs today. Different people in different areas have different needs. Some live where the electric grid is powered by renewables. Others live in areas where the grid is powered by fossil fuels and probably will be for some time. And then, many of us live in a house with a garage where you can easily charge, but there are lots of others that live in cities and high rises or apartments where overnight charging is more challenging. So based on this diversity of customer needs, we think there's a need for a diversity of solutions. And one example of that is our heavy-duty truck customers. They need to travel long distances with heavy cargo, and they can't wait hours for recharging. And for such cases, we think the fuel cell electric has some clear advantages over the battery. So Toyota thinks the fastest way to reduce carbon is to give our customers choices. And I guess I want to say one other thing is that we are really seeing a big shift in our customers. Lately, we've seen a lot more interest in our hybrid electric products. As I mentioned, the Sienna we just launched last year, as well as the Venza, both we're seeing really no rejection of the hybrids. We're seeing everybody coming in it being an appealing point. So that's a change from just a few years ago. So it is really an exciting time here in the industry.
Thank you. So I'd like to talk a bit about the technologies and some of the technical issues that are raised by EVs. And we'll stay on Monty. And Monty, you mentioned fuel cell electric vehicles. I'm just wondering if very quickly you could explain what fuel cell electric vehicles are, how they differ from battery electric vehicles.
Yes. So let me say, fuel cell electrics are actually very similar to electrics in that they're using electricity to power a motor to drive the vehicle. The key difference is instead of carrying the energy in a battery, you're carrying the energy in a hydrogen tank. And that hydrogen is then put through a fuel cell, which is really a kind of a reverse hydrolysis process that takes the hydrogen from your tank, oxygen from the air, and produces electricity and water. So the only thing coming out of the tailpipe is water.
Thank you. And now, could you speak a bit more generally about technical requirements for electric vehicles? What are the main technical requirements that cut across the EV spectrum?
Yeah, let me say that it's all driven by the customer, and what we're hearing from our customers is that they expect safety, affordability, peace of mind, which is often range, and reliability. And over the years of producing our own batteries, Toyota has gained a lot of data and know-how. And this is really important to prevent situations where some types of batteries can combust, for example. I think giving our customers a peace of mind that that's not going to happen is really important. And another is keeping the charge. I think all of us know from the batteries we use in our everyday life, our cell phone batteries, for example, that over time, batteries can lose their capacity for holding charge. And so this is another area where expertise really helps. And when we recently announced the BZ4X coming this year, we also announced that the batteries will keep 90% of their initial charge after 10 years. So those are some of the key concerns that we hear from our customers.
And are there any particular challenges, technological challenges that Toyota has dealt with over the years, aside from what you've already articulated?
Yeah, first, I think probably all of us are feeling the same challenge of packaging all of the batteries you need to get the range that our customers expect. They take up a lot of space. And then there's also protecting those batteries. Number one is collision safety. You have to have a really robust protection of those battery cells, considering all types of collisions. And another point with battery electrics and plug-in hybrid electrics, you usually have to package those batteries under the floor in order to find enough space. And that means you need to think about things on the road that can kick up and hit the battery. So protecting from underneath is also really important. And then another aspect is those high voltage cables. You don't want anyone cutting one of those. So you have to think about service and how you can shut off the high voltage for repair type situations. And really all of these problems are best solved by a holistic integrated approach. And this means designing the batteries and the vehicle together, and really optimizing the structure of the vehicle for the battery and vice versa.
Thank you. Linda, could you talk a bit about the development for the Ford F-150 Lightning?
Yeah, definitely. We had a lot of the similar challenges that Monty talked through, but I think for the Lightning, we can even take it up a notch in a way, because F-150 is a truck and our customers expect it to be durable and capable. So to make sure that it's durable and capable, just like Monty talked about, that underground protection, this is an off-roading vehicle. You can go off-road, you can tow, you can do everything that you would want to do with your vehicle today. So from that perspective, that capability is something that we had to show and be true to with the F-150 Lightning. Not only does it have to be capable and durable, just like today's truck, we also wanted to make sure that we added technologies in it for our customers so that it's not just a replacement per se. It's a better tool in many ways. And those were kind of for the most part, those were the challenges that we went through, is just trying to, one, make sure that it is capable, durable. We can put it through the same grueling, crazy testing that we put our F-150s through, so that the customer can have that peace of mind that they can do whatever they can do today. This truck, it tows up to 10,000 pounds, payload of up to 2,000 pounds. Those metrics are super important, but it's being able to do it consistently, reliably, and and still not have any issues from a vehicle perspective, whether it's cooling or durability and such. So I think those are the challenges that our team faced, but really working through it was actually quite a lot of fun, and we learned a lot about it. And there's some parallels to gas vehicles, but there's others that are just not even close parallels. So in a way, really going forward with the battery electric version was new invention in many ways.
Sure. What were some of the things that were not close parallels to internal combustion vehicles?
Well, for example, with engines, typically there's a lot of worries around high altitude, right? And how does the vehicle perform in not high altitude? With a battery electric, we don't really have that issue whatsoever because it's electric. We don't have cylinders, and it's not an engine. So that was one difference. But what we did find is when you continue to pull power through the vehicle, through towing or hauling, particularly up very large grades for an extended amount of time, you really tax the cooling system. And that was one very different piece that we really actually had to reevaluate the vehicle in a way to make sure that we updated the design to account for all of that. So a few years ago, we actually did an interesting little demonstration where we towed a train, and we actually learned quite a bit from that exercise, just in terms of cooling management and how to adjust for the design to make sure that we were truly robust over longer periods of times. And that's something that a gas engine doesn't have to worry about. So that's a major difference. And then, yeah.
So you've talked a bit about power and how that is a consideration and how Ford dealt with that. Monty, when he was talking about Toyota's heavy duty trucks, had mentioned range. Is range something that was also a consideration in developing the F-150 Lightning?
Definitely. Range is always a consideration when you're talking electric vehicles, right? Because that physics of what the energy in the battery is and what you're having to pull out for all of these tough kind of situations like towing and such draws on that energy demand. So for sure, that was something that we worked through. But I think we tried to take a bit of a really sensible approach, right? For especially our commercial customers, we had a lot of really good conversations with them, and in their mind, bigger wasn't bigger and longer range wasn't necessarily the right solution for them. So we actually went through and mapped out a lot of our customer usages from a commercial vehicle perspective. And we found that 200 miles was actually probably just about right. So we've actually sized our standard battery, which is our entry battery, at the 230 mile target. And that was because what we heard from our commercial vehicles customer is they're in this for the business, right? They need something that works for them, gets them what they need, but they don't want to pay extra money for batteries that they're not going to use at the end of the day. And if you think about the commercial structure, in the evenings, they go back to the depot or wherever, and they get that capability of charging. So for them, the amount of battery perfect for their needs for the day that charges fully overnight was the right solution for them. So we actually sized it that way. And then as we started thinking about retail customers and talking through things with retail customers, the one thing that we found is in many cases, the customer is going to be going through a bit of a lifestyle shift in a way, right? Today, with gas vehicles, customers have to, every so often go to a gas station. I had to go to the gas station the other day. It's like the first time in like 4 months that I've had to go because I am an EV now. But I was filling up for my mom, and it was freezing outside here in Michigan, and just cold and icky and horrible. And I was like, why am I doing this? Because EVs, you don't have that. You come home every day, you plug it in if you want to, and in the morning you wake up with full range every day. It's not a weekly exercise, it's a daily exercise, but that daily exercise allows you to leave in the morning with a full range. And in those cases where you do have longer travel, Ford has access to the largest charging network in North America with over 63,000 plugs, where our customers can charge, and 15% to 80% in our vehicle takes about 40 minutes. So it's still a really nice transition. And I know for me on road trips, by the time I get 300 miles in, I need a bit of a break anyway for comfort and just some food. So that 40 minutes works out really well.
Give the kids an opportunity to run around or something.
Exactly. And me.
Yeah. So thank you both. Could we talk a little bit about, this is the IPO Education Foundation event, and I'd like to talk a bit about how IP rights have impacted development in the EV space. Why don't we start with you, Monty? How have IP rights played a role in Toyota's efforts in this space?
Okay, they've been really important. As far as number of patents, Toyota is among the leaders in both batteries and hydrogen fuel cell, and not only in the auto industry, but overall. And being able to protect our investment in research is really important. But I think on the other side, the patent process also really helps the industry advance the technology overall. If we didn't have this type of IP process, I think we'd all be developing it in secret and keeping our discoveries hidden. By allowing these discoveries to be shared under protection, I think really enhances innovation and advances and speeds us all forward toward our goal of carbon neutrality.
And Linda, do you have any thoughts about how IP has impacted Ford's development in the EV space?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so Ford's approach and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, right? Our approach to electrification has really has been not to just simply switch to an electric propulsion system, right? But to truly look at the benefits of electrification and leverage those to provide our customers with new functionalities, new features that really only electrification can bring. So a lot of this creativity really comes down to being able to then go and take this idea and work through the technical and the design work to get it from concept to reality. And a lot of that obviously takes, engineering and intellectual property at the end of the day as the team works through these solutions to these problems. And some of the features like I'm talking about is like, for example, our intelligent backup power for the F-150 Lightning, which allows this truck to basically be a backup generator for your entire home ecosystem in the case of a power outage. Or Pro Power on Board, where we're leveraging the battery to provide power on the go for our customers, whether it's at a campsite, at a job site, or wherever. And there's around this truck, like literally 22 plug points that you can get in, whether it's 110 USBs, 220s, you name it. There's 22 of those plugs, but though that actually takes a lot of work and a lot of IP. So just for example, that Pro Power on Board application, we have over 30 patents alone on that. And then if you extend that to, the rest of the vehicle, it's really quite powerful what the team's been able to come up with in different innovations in a way to kind of help progress this as we transition, not only from an electrification perspective, but to provide the customer with even better solutions for their current issues. Because this Pro Power on Board or intelligent backup, that's not naturally something you think of your car as being a solution to. But in this case, we've made it so with a lot of really great work from the team, with the innovation and trying to also make sure that we leverage the intellectual property there as a solution.
Sure. It seems like both of you have mentioned patents and IP as something that's helped to drive innovation forward. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say so. But I think at Ford, we've also committed to sharing a lot of the IP too, to make sure that, it is something like Monty said, that we don't have to go design all our own in a vacuum. We can leverage a lot of that sharing across the industry to kind of help progress industry along.
Monty, agree, disagree? Any further thoughts?
Agree completely.
Very good. So let's zoom out a little bit and talk about how EVs interact with both the environment, the economy, and so forth. Both of you have mentioned this a bit so far during our discussion, but I think we could talk a little more here. Linda, you were talking before about some of the environmental commitments that Ford has made. Could we talk a bit more about how EVs do benefit the environment?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, part of the EV is that it's zero emission, right? So now we're not producing carbon really out of the tailpipes in a way. So I think that piece of it is pretty impactful. But I think the other piece of it is really the other responsible piece of it is really that disposal. And what do you do with that battery at the end of the day, at the end of life? And, the good thing is batteries are recyclable. So we are working with Redwood Industries, and we've announced that recent collaboration where we're gonna, work through a out of warranty battery recycling program. We'll have more information on that down the road, but those are some of the things that we are thinking about, making sure that we eliminate the carbon on the front end of this, and at the back end of this, making sure that we do have a great recycling program so that we're not, having issues with batteries out in the wild.
Are there any negative ramifications of the switch to electrification? Or is the disposal of end-of-life batteries the primary consideration? And
I think I think the disposal at end of life is probably the biggest concern, right? But in terms of carbon monoxide, tailpipes, it's zero emissions. So that's one of the benefits. I mean, I was just actually at the LA Auto Show recently, and we were running our Lightning and Mach-E's basically inside the building. And, that's one of the greatest benefits to a battery electric, is that you don't have that emission. So some of the things that we talked about, even with the power output, you can do all of that indoors and not have an issue. Whereas today, if you hook up a generator, you're going to have to put that outside. A gas generator, you're going to have to put that outside because, that's not great for our health. So, I think from an environmental perspective, the BEV really does do quite a bit there. And as far as what we do with the end of life, that's probably the biggest piece of it from my perspective, at least.
Sure. Monty, could you talk a bit about some of the issues between electric vehicles and the economy?
Sure. So we all know that today, really the entire auto industry is struggling with the supply of chips. We're all having limited production because of the supply of chips. And I think many in the industry are concerned that in the future, the next chip really could be the supply of rare earths, those rare earth metals that are used in both the motors and the batteries. And it's a challenge for all of us. We need to invest in alternatives, research in alternatives, and a better supply of those, ensuring that they're not just coming from one part of the globe and that there's some diversity in the availability and supply. And I guess another relative to that investment is this infrastructure bill that just passed and was signed by President Biden. I think this really helps the industry move forward. And not only is it helping expand the charging infrastructure, but it's a very broad approach, and it has provisions that will help us both with fuel cell electrics, battery electrics, and with plug-in hybrids. There's a lot of promising technology, and I think this wide approach and investing in diversity is going to be the best path forward for us to refine this technology and meet the needs of our customers.
Linda, you had mentioned earlier Ford's network of charging stations. Do you have any further thoughts on some of the infrastructure issues that Monty was just discussing?
Yeah, I mean, infrastructure is definitely still needed. 63,000 is great, but we would love to get even more, right? So this infrastructure this bill is going to help everybody, right? Providing the incentives for customers, that entry price is going to be even lower as a result of this. The infrastructure, there'll be so many opportunities going forward for customers to really adopt this as a result of it. So it's great.
Mm-hmm. And Monty, I'll give you the same opportunity. Linda talked a bit about environmental benefits. Did you have any further thoughts about some of the environmental benefits and if there are any negative ramifications for the switch to EVs?
Yeah. I think that battery electrics and other types of fuel cell electrics have huge potential for the future. There are considerations about the sizing of those batteries. I loved hearing Linda's story about sizing it just right for the needs of the customer. You can overdo it. If you put in too large of a battery, you're wasting a lot of those cells that could be used in other types of vehicles to reduce carbon overall. So I think having a holistic view on this, that the ultimate goal is reducing carbon and how best to do that is really important. When you're producing batteries, you're emitting carbon in that process, and it's kind of an investment. You're emitting some carbon in the production to avoid carbon over the lifetime of that vehicle. And that's, we can call it a carbon return on investment. And I think we need to take that kind of a viewpoint when we're deciding how to distribute those batteries.
So it's kind of a holistic approach, not just looking at the impact of the vehicle itself, but also the manufacturing process, the production sourcing components, I would imagine, has a carbon impact, right?
Absolutely. And just like Linda said, if you look at the buyers of trucks and their needs, the average US commute is only 32 miles, it's 16 miles one way. And so you don't need a huge battery pack for a 600-mile trip most of the time. Most of the time those batteries are being wasted in that kind of situation. So I think thinking about this holistically and how best to distribute those precious batteries is a really important consideration.
Very interesting. In the few minutes that we have left, since this is, again, for the IPO Education Foundation, I was hoping that both of you might share some thoughts with any students who are in the audience who may be interested in the EV space. Why don't we go ahead and start with Linda?
Sure. I mean, my biggest feedback for students is pursue what you love, pursue what you want to do. And with that, all will be fine. Continue to be curious, continue to ask those questions, and think about what the solutions might be. That's what IPs are all about, right? Is people coming up with great solutions to questions and issues that no one's been able to come up with solutions for in the past. And it's these little steps, and just do that. And, continue to progress science, technology, engineering, and math. Those are all very critical. That STEM area is all very critical in terms of trying to, get the background and some of the potential, solutions in the head, whether it's EV space or any other space. So just continue to be curious and continue to pursue your dreams.
Thank you. And Monty, what are your thoughts?
Great advice from Linda. If you do have an interest in mechanical, electrical, any of those fields, do consider the automotive industry, because we are entering a time of huge opportunity. We talked about in this, all of the transition that's taking place. Some have said it's similar to that time of the transition from the horse to the gasoline engine, the horse and buggy to the gasoline engine. So there's so much being developed. In the research, we see so many promising future technologies. So it really is a great time to be in the auto industry.
Thank you both so much for your time. I've learned a lot in talking to you, and I really appreciate you being involved and participating.
Thanks for hosting us, Josh.
Yeah, thank you.